Hello, I'm Sarah, the Real Simple Mama. I'm out here with some really angry, really cold chickens, and we have a video where we're going to teach you about some things to consider when it's below freezing and you have backyard chickens. I'm going to jump right into the content here. We have a terrible cold front, a freezing storm going on here in central South Texas. It has been in the teens and in the 20s, so you can see there is frozen water everywhere. I tried to cover as many of my plants as I could. So as usual, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of things to think about, a whole bunch of suggestions pretty quickly. You can pick and choose what works for your chickens. So the first I wanted to show you is that when it is below freezing, it is quite possible that, well, to be obvious, your chickens are going to slow down on their laying or maybe even stop laying. But if you are lucky enough to get a fresh chicken egg, they can either freeze solid in the coop or they can burst. So if you have chickens that are of laying age and it's below freezing, go and try to get the eggs as often as possible. I honestly couldn't tell you if an egg is still intact, it's just frozen. Is it still good to eat? Hopefully some of you guys who are more experienced, you can tell us down in the comments what you think. In my mind, if it's frozen solid and it's been sitting out there and then when it thaws, I don't want to eat it. I wouldn't feed it to my kids. But what I could do is I could scramble it or cook it fully and then give it back to the chickens and give them a little protein boost, something that's nice and warm. So that's the first consideration. The second consideration I'm showing you really briefly is that if you have plants in the chicken run, especially plants that are either potted because it's easier for them to freeze more easily because it's a smaller root system, or if they are plants that are just a year or two old, you want to either bring them in if possible, get them out of the wind, out of the cold. That includes putting them in a shed is better than nothing, putting them in the garage, putting them in your living room, putting them on your husband's side of the bed, whatever you need to do. Or at least, if you can't do that, then cover them. As you can see, I don't have enough blankets or, I'm using my own shirts and my own clothes, bed sheets, towels, tablecloths, anything that I can find. For me, I focus on covering the root system. There's no way that firebush in the center of your shot, for example, there's no way I could take up, 2 or 3 towels just to cover that. You need to focus on the plant's root system. And then, especially if you have nosy chickens or if the wind is bad, then cover those tarps, that fabric, with rocks or something to keep it down. Do not use plastic to cover up your plants. Plastic will just let the freezing temperature go straight through. It acts almost like, if you can imagine it with electricity, the plastic acts like a conductor and it just lets that freezing temperature go right through. It's not breathable and it will basically give frostbite to your plants or the plant equivalent. So the next consideration, and you're looking at it right now, is what am I going to do about my chickens' water? Now, I've said it in other videos. I help people with comments and in email all the time. If just because you are cold, it doesn't mean that your chickens are cold. I know I'm in my own shot there, sorry. Just because you are cold outside, it doesn't mean that your chickens need intervention. You can see it's in the 20s right now and my chickens are eating, drinking, they're wandering around. They're like, whatever. Remember that chickens can eat more so that they can puff up. They just need to have a shelter out of the wind. And of course, if you have precipitation, that they are out of that. But when it comes to water, yes, chickens still do need access to water. So I've been trying a few experiments I wanted to show you. The first is that a little tray of water or something that is less volume, obviously is going to freeze more quickly than a big 5-gallon bucket or a huge waterer or a huge trough. So keep that in mind. I always have multiple water stations. And as you can see, the smaller one, that's just that little gray bucket in your shot, the gray has frozen solid. So you need to be going out more often and watching it. I cannot show you some of the options because I choose to not do them. There are water heaters that can be used for poultry, or water heaters that people get that looks like a hot plate. It goes under a dog's water bowl. For me, if I felt that I needed to buy something that uses electricity, that makes artificial heat, if I needed to, I would use the hot plate that's for the dog bowl. I feel like there is a less risk of a heat-related fire or an electrical shortage or something like that. So that is an option. Another option, you can see that it failed with that little gray thing, is I put a water bottle in it. So if you have something floating on the surface of your water, whether it's enclosed or it's just like a big open trough, if you have something floating around and moving around and it's being agitated by the wind and stuff like that, it can help break up ice that starts to freeze on the top of the water. And also if you use a water bottle like I did, and of course this is the example that didn't work, so ignore that. But if you put in a water bottle that's got really, really salty water, salt water has a much lower freeze point than just regular plain water. Now, of course, I'm not saying dump a whole bunch of salt in the water that your chickens are going to drink, but the more salt you put in it, the lower the freeze point is. So it's possible that if you put something that is, really salty water, that basically it won't freeze unless it's in the 20s or it's in the negatives as far as that water temperature. So the main thing that I tell people to worry about when it's below freezing as far as your chicken's health is make sure they still have drinking water and they still have food. And again, like I was saying, the big point with the drinking water is you can't let it freeze. Unfortunately, a final note as I'm making another clip here to update this video, and I'll walk around a little bit. But there was, this morning in the local paper, there was another instance of somebody who had a heater going. I'm not sure the details on if it was like a heat lamp or an actual like portable heater or something, but there was a fire, there was an electrical issue, and the person's house, not just the chickens, of course, the chickens all died in the fire, but the person's house is considered a total loss. So please, 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 even if it's getting down into 0 or below, and again, check with your local chicken gurus, contact the farm people or the farm supply stores in your area to see if there's somebody local who can help you. But there are plenty of chicken breeds who do just fine out in the snow. Again, they've got a zone where they can go to get out of the weather, where they can warm themselves up a little bit with a good snack, and where they've got fresh water. But just this morning when I was going to come out and do the final clips for this video, one of the headlines was that the person's home, God, y'all, right before Christmas. And of course they had good intentions. They wanted to keep their chickens warm, but I'll say it one more time. Just because you're cold outside doesn't mean you need to run out and intervene for your chickens. Okay, just be smart and think about what did the chickens actually need? Because I would hate for anybody here to suffer any kind of tragedy, whether it's just losing your birds or, some kind of expense on your family, or worst case scenario, of course, somebody passes away in the fire or you lose your home. So to conclude, a couple of things to think about when the temperatures are below freezing with your backyard flock. And yes, this is a separate clip, and they have the biggest, nastiest looking, stinkiest Christmas treat ever. Just to think about, the most important things, if you're still watching, are that your chickens have running water, they have fresh water that doesn't freeze, and then they just have a shelter. Again, it does not have to be temperature controlled. It does not have to have a heater in it where the chickens can get out of the elements. Extra food is great. You can see they've got, I don't know if you can tell, this is quick oats that have been heated with really hot water. There's birdseed in there, there's grub leaves, there's cayenne pepper, raw garlic, chili powder, fresh oregano. There's what else? Oh, Greek yogurt is in there. So all of the yummy things. Extra food will help your chickens to keep that little furnace going, putting more logs on the fire. But just make sure that they're out of the elements. They've got a zone where they can kind of have that little escape. And your chickens should be able to make it through. The last note as a reminder as well, don't forget that chickens can get frostbite, especially if you have a flock that either they stay outside all day or you have like a rooster who doesn't want to come in or something like that. Remember, you can use a barrier cream, Aquaphor, Vaseline, something like that, because it creates a barrier so that flesh, we heard something, so that flesh doesn't have access to below freezing temperatures. Gracie, you missed the bus, girly. So let me know down in the comments what you do. I'm going to stop talking because here comes a plane, but I hope that this has been helpful and given you a little bit of peace of mind.